There's material. There's a gesture towards the object. A movement on the object. A motion with the material. There's a pause, a rotating gaze. Years of observing. Black holes into a minute. Final project, idiosyncratic. If I give it to you or you buy it from me, it doesn't make you a materialist. Materialism is an ugly word. Materials shaped by nimble and inspired hands. Hands that know and never know is beauty. There's movement, there's an object, there's material, there's a gesture.
Okay, today we're going to make these sort of like, small little like what we call teacups. So, sort of, Japanese / sort of Asian inspired, some more small cups for, drinking out of. And we're doing slabs, so sort of soft slabs. So, you can let the slab set up a bit, but not too much. And then we'll sort of put them together. But the first thing, of course, we need to throw out a slab, and we need to maybe, review that slab throwing a little bit after seeing what some of you did as you were teaching your family how you were throwing up the slabs. You might want to work on this a bit. So, I know I'm going to eventually, I need to have a slab that is 11 inches by 4 inches, and I want to have a little something extra. So I could throw one out that was a little bit bigger than 11 by 4, and then maybe have a small one also side, or depending on what I end up with. So because I know that, and I'm going to want it to end up being, in the very end, I want it to be about 1/4 inch thick throughout the slab. But when I first throw it out, I think I want to get to about 5/16. So I want to be in between 1/4 and 3/8, which would be 5/16. Before I do the texture, because when I put the texture on, potentially some of that slab is going to sort of move out a little bit as I'm pressing into it and stuff like that. So we want to keep it, about 5/16 before things. So that's the goal. So, and to make sure I got plenty, maybe just with one slab, I might want to cut off about 1 inch, somewhere in that range. So I have a thick slab about that, and I should be able to get a decent slab out of that I can use. And I won't need more than one if I get a big enough slab and stuff like that. I'll have plenty of the excess to do the bottom and other stuff, and maybe even change it up a bit. So. So I like to, kind of tap the edge there before we even start, and then, so what I was kind of seeing some people were doing is they're kind of just going like this. They're just flipping it rather than bringing it out and bringing it back towards you a little bit. And of course you want to do it not too hard, because we slam it down, it's going to get stuck to whatever surface you're. So I want to bring it out a little bit and bring it back and let the weight of the clay do a lot of the work. So. Keep my edges a little bit tighter. And so it's definitely wide enough. So I really just need to get it to come out. So the whole thing is flipping, coming out a little bit, and then coming back to me. Having some issues with this slab. Some of that right now. once I get it about here, then maybe I'll finish it off a little bit with my pipe or something to kind of make sure it's a little bit more even. Kind of start in that middle, find that high spot, kind of work on that. And just, you know, kind of work on a little bit, not kind of get too crazy into it. Come back and work the other side a little bit, and this will help sort of even out and smooth my piece too. A little more even, I can see about getting this to thin out a little bit. So I might want to cut an edge where it gets a little thicker, and then this edge here I can sort of measure and see, you know, if that's too thin. Right now it is about 3/8. I really want it to be maybe a little bit thinner. But I definitely already have my 11-inch piece by 4-inch piece in there. But it's going to be thicker in the middle here a little bit, so make sure this is not too thick, because on our cups we really don't want to have really don't want our cups to be too thick and heavy necessarily. There's sort of a fine line in there. We want it to feel sort of light but thick enough to hold temperature and not have it, you know, whatever the cold or the hot run out. It's a nice thing about a ceramic cup is what it can do there for, you know, holding the temperature compared to something that is thin and plastic doesn't really hold it. Okay, so I think this should really be pretty good. Once we have our slab and we know it's about, you know, just a little bit bigger than a 1/4 inch right now, then we want to do some texture on it before I cut my rectangle, my 11 by 4 rectangle. And so here I know I have plenty, right? So I can really get my, you know, 11 by 4 rectangle in there, and then have some excess left over for the bottom of my piece and a foot ring to put on there. So I want to think about doing some texture. So if this is going to end up coming up into a cup, you know, maybe I'm going to be looking at it like that, so I might want to do my texture sort of that way too, right? So somewhere in there. So I can do all kinds of things. I might want to play around with some stuff and, you know, do some of these edges here, or even some other excess pieces that I might have to sort of see, you know, what can be done here. So you know, like stuff like that, you know, is that something interesting? This is a sort of a massage thing that I got in like a Daiso store. We have an old meat tenderizer, right? Wooden meat tenderizer. It has a nice sort of little waffle looking sort of texture. Of course I can always take, you know, my pine cone and sort of run it across, you know, and I can just do the whole thing like that if I wanted to. Got all kinds of other stamps sometimes that, you know, were meant for ink and stuff like that, but if they're nice thick, you know, some of them work really well. Like this one works really great. It's one of my favorites. So I know that I can get a really cool sort of pattern sort of here, right? And then here's another sort of flower one that got from somewhere. Does a pretty nice stamp. all kinds of little things. I found this little like end of a sort of pine cone. Got a really nice little sort of texture there. We have these stamps that I just got recently in the Goodwill with some kanji characters for different things. So I can put that, and then I can have to think about centering that on the parts of the cup if I wanted to figure that out. And if things don't work out so well, I can usually come back and get rid of some of this stuff. Just kind of roll it back out. Try something different maybe, There's all kinds of things that you find, like a little piece of coral, these little edges right here. Do a little nice little sort of texture. Do a nice little pattern across it. Even some of these little food grabbers here have this little nice end, sort of a little rectangle. Also sort of put it in that way, make this sort of pattern, make it look sort of like a brick, sort of pattern or something like that. It's all different kinds of stuff you can do. Another thing sometimes we find that we do textures, some of these mats that are for, door mats. So maybe I try one of these. This is one I got from Home Depot. It's meant for like steps, outdoor steps and stuff like that, but it's got this great texture on it. So maybe I take my piece, kind of lay it in there somewhere where I think it's going to be cool. Maybe I'll sort of center that. All right. And then, just kind of gently, hopefully push some of that in there without it sticking too much. So I want to avoid pushing on these edges too much because that's going to stuck. I want to be able to have something that I can peel sort of off, So maybe I can end up with something pretty interesting from that. And I do. Now, I got a little problem right there, where I got a little hole in there, but I can just take a little bit of clay and patch that up. I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'll just center a nice cut, my 11 by 4, and I can have it pretty interesting. And I can go back and add a little clay and fix that. So, there's lots of different things. We'll show you some other places that you can find some really good texture from. Okay, so when we're out and about looking for other, types of texture we can do, stuff like that we can get like all across our slab, in sort of a pattern. Look for stuff like this. Like here's some asphalt here that has, sort of been worn down, so a lot of the aggregate, so the rock is actually still sort of left in here. And so that looks like a great place to do. So I'll take my slab out there, and I'm just going to sort of pop it down into a spot that I think looks good, and I'm going to just tap it in. I'm going to stay away from these edges because I don't want it to get stuck and I won't be able to peel it back up. So I just sort of go all the way through here until I think I got something pretty decent. And then pop that up. And there we go. I have this sort of nice sort of interesting pattern right there that I can use. And I'll let this stuff dry up a little bit and we can brush some of that stuff off, and a lot of it will burn out potentially in the vis firing, and then when we glaze it won't be an issue. Okay, so another place that we might be able to get some texture from is any kind of like brick wall like this. It's got all kinds of stuff. The great thing about clay when it's still damp like this is that it'll pretty much stick right there. And again, I stay away from these edges, so I'll be able to peel this back off. Just pat it a few times, I'll peel that off, and see what I get. Kind of an interesting looking sort of texture there we might be able to use. So another thing we might be able to use is this. I've actually never tried to use this before, but seems like now's a good time. So you might get a kind of interesting pattern on there. So again, I'm just going to take my slab. I need to kind of push that in a little bit more. Let's peel this off and see what we get. Oh, pretty cool. Pretty interesting. That wasn't too bad. It kind of looks like a little bit of a brick wall kind of style. Okay. So another place too is like any kind of like exposed, rock wall like this or like that looks really good. So we'll try that. So the thing is I'll just kind of get it up there. And again, stay away from those edges, otherwise it might be hard to get it off. And so when I'm doing this too, is it's kind of coming out again a little bit smooth. That's why I wanted to have it be a little bit, be more like 5/16, so that when it stretches out a little bit more, when I'm doing this to get the texture, it'll still be, it hopefully will be about 1/4 inch. So that we end up with this. This is, great texture right there. Okay, so then last but not least, this is actually my favorite place to get texture from. This is there's lots of different trees that have really great texture. A lot of oak trees have great, fantastic texture, and then, some other sort of species. This happens to be a ornamental pear, which means that it flowers but does not produce fruit. But it's a great tree. This has just got this amazing bark here. And so I love using this spot. Same thing, I'm just going to sort of tap it in, stay away from the edges. Just get some really great texture in here. And then just peel it back. Man, it's just fantastic sort of pattern there that I just love.
All right, hello everyone, how are we doing? Today we're going to be going over how to make these kind of Asian inspired tea bowls. It's going to be using a lot of the same techniques actually that we use to make the fry trays. So with the fry trays, you throw out a slab, you cut out your 7x10 rectangle, you cut the little darts or the little corners out, and you're going to fold and score and slip. So we're going to do kind of the same process with this. You're going to roll out some slabs, or throw out some slabs, and in order to make the corners of these little cups, you're going to be using those same kind of cutting out the little darts and scoring and slipping and joining your edges. So first things first, you want to make your slabs. We've gone over that, past few assignments, so you should be very good at making slabs by now. Something different about this one, we would like you to add some texture. So, like Mr. Mead showed you, throw out the slab. You have the texture added. Here I just kind of found a little grate on the ground, and then another just kind of grated wall thing to make some texture. So this one will be I'm going to cut out a 4-inch by 11-inch rectangle, and that's going to be the walls of the cup. You want to make 2 slabs, one for your 4 by 11 rectangle, and then one smaller one. This one's a little big, you probably don't need as much, for kind of the base and a foot. It's just easier to have 2 slabs to work with and handy at all times. So first things first, so this is going to be my wall here, the walls of the cup. I'm going to turn it over here and measure and cut. So like I said, you want to make a 4 by 11-inch rectangle. Make sure you have your ruler handy. I'm going to kind of make a straight edge here just to kind of measure off of. So what I'm going to do is just kind of cut off a little piece of this end here just to make it a little more squared off. Alright, so then from here I'm going to measure, I'm just going to take a quick 11-inch measurement. If you want to make a perfect rectangle, sometimes it's easier to start with a squared off kind of straight edge and use your ruler as a little guide. So I just kind of line it up there. 11 inches, make a little mark. And then I'll just make a couple marks for 4 inches. And you can use For this you can use your knife, you can use a paper clip also just to kind of make some scratch marks. Remember, always measure twice, you cut once. So measured once, let's measure again, that's 4 inches by 11. Alright, and then over here what I'll do is line up with this bottom kind of mark here. Actually, and in order to make it straight, so now since I've cut my kind of straight edge here, the trick I do, I just kind of line that up with the edge of the ruler, and that should be a straight line. So I'm just going to kind of make a mark before I cut the 11. I'm going to do that on both little 4-inch marks that I made, lining up that back end of the ruler, making a little line. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. Now I'm going to go over here and mark the end line where I marked that 11-inch first little slot. So and there you go. Now I have a perfect 4x11 rectangle. Again, you might want to use that ruler as a straight edge to make your cuts. So I'm going to cut off this back end first. Butter knife will work just fine. And a lot of you guys, we saw in the videos, you're making your cuts like you're stabbing someone or something. You're making these really dramatic, like you're holding a knife like this and you're just like, trying to get in there. Hold it like you're cutting a steak or a piece of chicken. So you're just going to kind of take your finger, have it at a slant, and just nicely cut through the clay. You don't have to be all just like trying to muscle through it. You should let the, you should let the knife just kind of do the work for you. So, all right, there's one piece there. Cut off this bottom edge here. Alright, so now we have our 4-inch by 11-inch slab with some nice texture on there. And this is going to make basically the walls of the cup. So what I'm going to do is kind of, actually I'm going to stand it up like this, kind of form it around to make a cylinder. And actually what I'm going to do is kind of bevel these edges a bit. Because as you can see here, the ones we've done already, it's not going to be, you're going to lose some of that texture if you try to make it seamless. So by keeping that seam, just kind of keep some of the texture, and I think it looks a little nicer. But you're going to want to have a good, joint there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of bevel those edges, just so it kind of makes a better joint. So let me actually. What I'm actually going to do is kind of cut down this way. Just a little bit. Make that joint a little better. Alright, stand it back up. do is kind of alright, looks pretty good. Remember to always score and slip, so take a paper clip, a little bit of water. Scratch up the surface. Both parts, they'll be connected, not just one side. Alright, stand it back up. And apply some pressure. Try not to smush the clay so much that you'll mess up the texture though. That's going to be key. So if you need to kind of move the clay around to get your fingers in a better angle, you can get your finger in there and kind of smooth out the inside, or you can take, you know, the end of your knife or something, or basically what you want to do is compress the clay at that seam just to make a stronger bond. Actually, I'll probably do some more of that here on the outside as well. Okay, looks pretty good. Yeah. So, in order to mark our spots, we're going to make the cuts. You want to lie your straight edge across, and imagine having another one to kind of make 4 equal points around the rim of that, or the base of this cup actually. And you're going to mark them. Or you can just, like I said, stick like this popsicle stick kind of in there and mark 2 equal points, or 4 equal points. Looks pretty good. Alright, then from there, you're going to get your ruler again. And in order to make these cuts, you kind of want to have about 1 inch wide at the top, and they need to be about 3/4 of an inch deep. So if I'm looking at it from here, I'm going to take the little mark that I made, put that at 1/2 inch mark, so it's in the center. And we'll take my paper clip here and just kind of mark out that inch. So 1/2 inch on that side and 1/2 inch on this side. Do that to all 4 points. Okay. And then now you want to mark about 3/4 of an inch deep for how deep you're going to make the cuts. So put the ruler on there. It's about 3/4. Alright, so next what I'm going to do is take the butter knife or whatever you're using to cut, and as evenly as you can, there's not really a science to this, but you want to make even little triangle cuts out of here. And as much as you can support the clay with your fingers, the less it will kind of move and just be easier to cut. It won't really mess up the shape too much. I'm trying to do this backwards so you guys can see, but alright. So you're going to just do that for all 4 corners here. Let me just kind of cut them out. And this is why it's important to kind of let your clay set up a bit and stiffen up. This one's a little more on the wet side, and it's really, you know, any little movement you make is gonna kind of move this clay around. So if it's a little stiffer, it'll be easier to work with. Let's get this final one out. See, and then your knife kind of sticks to it a little bit, so it's stiffened up a little bit. It's easier to work with. So now we have our 4 points cut out. And basically what you're going to do is fold these together, score and slip these pieces, and kind of do the same thing that we did with the fry tray. It's just going to connect the pieces together. You're going to make a little bit of a more pulled in kind of base of this cup. So remember to score and slip. And always, you know, get the very tips of where you're going to be putting it in, or you know, putting the pieces together. Just score and slip all the way to the edges, because otherwise sometimes these little end pieces get missed and they kind of come apart easier. So always get all the way to the very edge. A little bit of water on there. Okay, so then you're going to kind of fold these little flaps in, connect these corners here, apply pressure. You should see some of that water or slip squeeze out a bit. And do that for all 4 corners here. probably wondering, why is there still a hole in the middle of the cup? We'll get over that in a sec. But basically we're going to cut out another base piece and kind of put that there. So last little corner here. That could have been a better cut. It was kind of thick on the edge, you know, that seam there, so you might have to work around that, make some better cuts to kind of fit it together. Okay, so the outside looks pretty good. Make sure to always look back on the inside, and you're going to have, you know, the same seam issues that you had before, so if you can get your finger in there, it's kind of hard. Finger, or you can get, you know, a piece of the chopstick, or basically what you want to do is try and compress those edges or those seams as much as you can, just to avoid cracking. So the seams are a little smoothed out and kind of look nicer. The integrity of the cup will kind of work a little better. You can get your, you know, butter knife here and kind of smooth it out even. What I'm kind of doing is just going across from one end, one side to the other, and just kind of smushing the clay and smearing it over one another, and then going back with a finger and smoothing it out. So now we kind of have these 4 pulled in points here, kind of at the bottom of our cup. And so now what you're going to do is take this second slab. This one's a little big, so I'm just going to kind of cut off a piece here. I'm just going to cut off this end piece for now. And you're going to make a little base piece to put on the bottom here and just kind of, you know, bring it all together. So I'll put my little cup on top of this slab, measure it out, trace it out with a, you know, your paper clip or your knife or something. Okay. So you're just going to kind of trace it out. Doesn't have to be exact, but you know, just get the shape there, the general shape, and take your knife, kind of cut that piece out. You're going to flip your cup upside down. If you want to, you can kind of cut away some of this, like slanted in, raised pieces here, just to kind of make a smoother seam when you attach this base. So I might just shave away a little bit of this. It's a little wet, so it's hard to do, but just to make it a little more flush. Alright, you're going to kind of, let's see here, match it up with, I think that's how it was. Okay, score and slip. as we always do. So then you're gonna, once you score and slip, line up the piece. How did that go? I think it was like, no, it was more like this. All right. Then you're going to compress it on there a little bit. And what I find easiest is actually just to flip it upside down and kind of smush that base on there. Get it on nice and tight. Okay. Now the inside is, going to look a little unfinished, I guess. So what I would do is, again, take some kind of a tool, either a popsicle stick, your knife, maybe the end of the knife here, just kind of smooth out, I don't know if you can see that, but you're going to smooth out and kind of compress, and if you want to, you could even add a little coil in there and kind of reinforce it a little bit. I just do that to show you guys real quick. So just roll out a small little coil and kind of get that in there. And anytime you have a seam kind of drastic like that and it's hidden, it's not a bad idea to add a coil just to reinforce. And you can go in there with your knife or end of your chopstick and kind of smooth it out a bit. If you can, with your fingers, get in there and just really smooth it out. Try and stick my hand in there and get looking a little more finished. Go back and smooth that out a little more. And then the bottom, just make sure the edges, the seams here are looking nice. I would also just kind of go over that with either a tool, one of your little ribs you cut out with your credit card or gift card or something, and just kind of go over that seam, make it look a little more neat, and also just kind of strengthen that bond there. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Honestly, that right there is not a bad cup, but we're going to make it better. We're going to add a foot to it, like how these have, so it can sit up a little taller. And we're going to use this second slab again that we cut out the base for. I'm going to do about a 1 inch, maybe like a 3/4 of an inch tiny little strip. So again, just kind of mark about 3/4. Oops. I don't want mine to sit up too tall and look kind of like more like a goblet. I want it to be a little shorter, so I'm only going to do about 3/4 of an inch. Just kind of, again, use that ruler straight edge, just kind of mark. Probably didn't have to do this in the middle of the slab, but oh well. Just cut off this piece here. This one's a little, didn't need this big of a slab. Alright. Okay. See how the texture is on that. There's a little bit of texture. So now what you're going to do is kind of lay it on there, see how long it needs to be. I cut it out a little longer than it needed to be because I'm just going to trim it away. Just kind of eyeball it at first. See how it's looking. Alright, then maybe make a little mark where you need to make a cut and trim off that excess piece to connect it. Alright, then you go back, size it to fit. Still a little long. Trim a little more off. Okay, that looks better there. So now I'm gonna score and slip and join this piece here. Remember, you're going to be scoring and slipping everything you connect. So anytime you're, joining walls, adding a handle to something, adding a foot, you're going to score and slip. Alright. Apply the pressure, smooth it out a little bit. And then again, you're going to score and slip this base piece here. Both sides. Alright. Add some water and attach. Now what I like to do, you're going to have a seam on this piece as well. So I kind of like to line it up with the seam on the cup here, just to make it look a little nicer, I think. Okay. Smush it on there a little bit. Flip it upside down. And then again, you might want to go in there and reinforce that inside part with another coil. Since you won't be seeing these, you won't necessarily be looking underneath the cup that much, so it doesn't need to look that nice. I'm just going to go in there and smush it with my fingers. And the outside just kind of, I'm just going to try and make it look as nice as possible here. Make sure the seams are lined up. I kind of like to put a little texture over that seam by using, maybe the end of this chopstick here. Just kind of compresses the clay a little more, reinforces that seam. You can use, you could use this shell even and just kind of make some marks over that seam. Gonna go back and forth. All right. And then once you kind of have it all constructed, kind of eyeball it, maybe level it out a little bit with your hands. If you need to smush it down a little bit, make sure to always smooth out the seam or the edges here. So take a little bit of water. You don't want to ever have any hard edges, especially something you're going to be putting your mouth on. Smooth it out. You can use something like mac and cheese dish, or maybe a little yogurt cup if you want to stick it in there and try to make it a little more round. Okay, and then now that you've kind of gotten the shape that you want, everything's looking good. Make sure to wrap it up. It's cold and dry out in this fall, so just wrap it nice. Maybe stick some of the plastic in the actual cup. Get it around there nice and tight. Even if you're done, wrap it and let it sit overnight, and then assess it again the next day. Let it, just helps the drying process. After you kind of let it sit for 24 hours, then you can maybe loosely wrap it and let it dry slowly, because there's a lot of connected parts that could crack or come apart, so drying slowly is important. Alright, and you can make your Japanese or Asian inspired teacups. Alright.
There's material, there's a gesture towards the object, a movement on the object, a motion with the material. There's a pause, a rotating gaze, years of observing black holes into a minute.